Hello, people of YouTube and of the podcast sphere. Welcome to Spectator Diff. I am Brad, Matt is over there, and we are the two most underpaid spectators in the Overwatch League. And we have started this esports podcast to break down professional Overwatch for you. So here's how it is going to work. Every week, around 12:30 Eastern, sometimes Pacific, in today's case Central, plus or minus 45, you know, some arbitrary amount of time every Monday, we will be here to talk about the happenings in the Overwatch League. We will hit you with some predictions for next week. We're going to break down a match of the week, talk about some headlines, not necessarily in that order, and then we have live. Watching this for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel. At least hit us with a like, maybe comment. We'll read some of those on the air while we're live, and yeah, that stuff really helps us out. It's free to us, free to you, and yeah, anything you can do to interact with our content and support us would be great. You can also find us anywhere you consume your podcast mediums. Our audio and videos available on Spotify. The VODs will be there, and the VODs will always be up on this channel, and then you can find us wherever else. So hit us with some downloads as well. All of that to say, here we are. The Summer Showdown is over, and we're gonna kick off with some frickin' headlines. So, Matt, start us off.
You know, excellent intro. You're getting good at this, Brad.
Hey, thanks,
you really
man.
are. Hey, you're welcome. Look, okay. Everyone's talking about Overwatch 2 Battle Pass. I guess that means we also have to talk about Overwatch 2 Battle Pass. So there have been a bunch of leaks, right? Here's what, if you haven't heard about the Overwatch 2 Battle Pass, oh baby, listen up. I'm gonna tell you about it. There have been a bunch of leaks, and nobody knows what the shit's going on. That's it. Now you're caught up on the Overwatch 2 Battle Pass drama. I wish that was the end of the story. Unfortunately, it isn't. A lot of the things that have come out in the leaks have upset people because they're putting things behind a paywall, including Fox Girl support. Now, John Spector has come out and said, yeah, all right, we are going to be putting these things behind a paywall. However, everything will still be available for free on the free-to-play path. So there you go. Everybody's really upset. That's all the information that we have. Anything else you hear otherwise is made up and unconfirmed. Brad, I know we both have a lot of feelings about people having feelings about the Battle Pass system. So go ahead, tell me your feelings.
I'm going to try and keep this as concise as possible, because if I don't, we're going to be here for 45 minutes, and then have still the rest of the show to do.
Yeah.
I would recommend, if you're watching us, you probably have heard of Your Overwatch, another channel on YouTube, hosted by Frito. He did a very great video about this whole thing. I think it was on Friday. Had a lot of great points to share, most of which I agree with. I will probably copy a handful of them here. Watch that. But in general, the Overwatch community doesn't realize how good they had it for as long as they did. This is the system that literally every other live service game currently has adopted. Your Fortnites, your Apex Legends. And this whole scandal is the thing that kind of pushed me from the Apex community in the past 6 months, because every time something like this happens, everybody, you know, I don't blame the content creators. They have to jump on a story, especially Overwatch ones, because there's not a lot to talk about. But like, they've blown this out of all proportion. I think the best thing that everyone can do is just wait. We have 3 weeks until release. They have not clarified exactly how this is going to work yet. I suspect we'll be getting something like that in the next week or two. But it is going to be free. I think that is the biggest takeaway. It is going to be free, and everybody needs to chill. You can make the argument about competitive viability and oh, Overwatch League is all, or not Overwatch League, Overwatch is all about counterpicking and all that. I have bad news for you. Actually, I have some good news and then some bad news. The good news is Overwatch 2 doesn't work like that. The 5v5 setting, team synergy matters so much less unless you're at that top 1% of players that you're not going to notice if someone on your team hasn't bought the battle pass and doesn't have instant access. There is a play wall. You'll be able to play the game and get the hero. So like, I'm sorry, if you're not in Masters or above, probably even GM at that point, you're not going to notice. And if you are in Masters or above, chances are you've spent the money, the $10 on the Battle Pass to get it instantly anyway. If competitive viability is that important to you, you are likely in that group of people that bought the Battle Pass. You're likely dedicated enough to consistently buy the Battle Pass and have the heroes, so it becomes less of a factor. Look, they're giving you new content. They need the game is free. I think it was leaked that PvE is going to be free as well. Like, in order to sustain that, something cannot be free, and it's going to be the Battle Pass. And if you're not confident that you're going to be playing enough to warrant, to just play for free and get the hero, then you're probably gonna have to buy the battle. I'm sorry, like there will have to be some transactional thing here. Either you play the game a bunch or you pay. I'm sorry, it's free. This is what you get for free content and having free content. Everybody relax about it. It's gonna be okay. It's not gonna be pay to win. They can't do that. That is video game suicide for a live service game. Full stop.
Yeah, there you go. And I level with people who are upset about a battle pass coming to Overwatch because I hate battle passes. I hate modern gaming. Back in my day, you bought a cartridge for $45 and that was the whole goddamn game. And I miss those days. But it's 2022 now. That's not how video games work anymore. And like you said, Brad, I mean, Overwatch 2 is free. This content's gonna come for free, and daddy's gotta make his money, baby. You're gonna have to pay for something if you want everything. That's just the way capitalism works. It sucks, I'm sorry. But also, League of Legends has been playing this game for like 1,000 years.
Yep.
And as far as I'm aware, League of Legends is still the biggest esport, and it seems to be working just fine for them. I do want to throw out Junk Soldier asked in chat with that roadmap they published on what's being released in phases. They stated 3 new heroes coming on October 4th. My understanding is that Sojourn and Junker Queen are the other 2 of those 3 new heroes. They are considered new, even though they were available in the beta.
Correct. So. And then they did release the roadmap of like the second phase, or the second season, I guess it will be at that point, will be another new hero, another new map or 2, and then it's going to be, they released a short progression. They gave us a broad 2023 scope that was going to include the PvE kind of thing starting in January, stuff like that. It'll be a 9-week season, I believe is what they said, which is a faster turnaround than Apex Legends. With Apex is at 12 weeks, 3 months, something like that. And then yeah, I mean, they've given us a very, very brief roadmap of what they are kind of looking at. My biggest concern outside of the Battle Pass scandal, my biggest concern is that this release ends up being somewhat of like the Halo Infinite release from last year, that fiasco, where there just wasn't anything really notable. We know we're getting 3 heroes. We know what those 3 heroes are. We know that we're going to get a battle pass system, probably a clan system, the new maps that were showcased in the betas, and we know that 2CP is gone along with those maps, and the whole game has changed to 5v5 with a new engine. So like, I think cumulatively as a PvP update, that's solid considering the game is just transitioning and Overwatch 1 ceases to exist. I am concerned about the longevity of that if they don't come out swinging out of the gates.
Yeah. All right, that's all I want to talk about Overwatch 2's Battle Pass. Moving on, we made it, nerds. Overwatch 2 might be getting a Happy Meal.
Wait,
so
really? I didn't hear about this.
This is a fun little news story that I found. Apparently, a couple of guys posted on Reddit that they work at McDonald's Australia, and recently an Overwatch 2 button popped up on their point of sale system in the same place that like Monopoly bundles or Happy Meal or whatever would typically go. So McDonald's has been doing all sorts of kitschy Gen Z things to try and get the kids to buy shitty burgers. And they've been doing, like the Justin Bieber meal or the Megan Thee Stallion meal or what have you. hey, maybe we're gonna get an Overwatch 2 meal, and that rips. I don't know. I'd eat an Overwatch 2 meal from McDonald's one time to say I did it. Brad, if you were to put together an Overwatch 2 meal at McDonald's, what would be included?
Are we talking food items or the toy? Because I'm like, I can think of all the toys that I would have. Like, I would have a Junker Queen with like a little.
That's not the interesting question. We're talking about the food.
Oh man, I mean, I'd like to see just like I'd like to see a custom like Overwatch 2 themed beverage for at the very least. Like, I would want some crazy color of Mountain Dew. Actually, I would want G Fuel to have like a flavor in the machine. And it's just like it's you know, that's like I don't know.
What if we get a nuggy sauce?
Yeah.
So go ahead and
like Omnic oil or something.
Yeah, Omnic oil. That's a good one. Junk Soldier just said in chat
a Pachimari burger. Yeah, I'm down for that. I would go with that.
I would get a 6-piece nuggie with Junker sauce, whatever. It would probably just be like Cajun ranch, but whatever. I'm down.
A Pachimari bloomin' onion, like.
What if we get something called a wrecking ball, which is just a bunch of burgers smushed together? What if you just get 3 burgers that are all fused together in a ball?
Oh, it's not even a burger. It's just a meat wad.
It's
just a giant meatball. Well, they have. It doesn't like McDonald's like Japan have like spaghetti and meatballs or something like.
Yes, that's a real
like,
thing.
It would be like spaghetti and wrecking balls. Like, it's just like, come on now.
Spaghetti and wrecking balls. Oh, Big Mac deep fried from the chat.
And I literally just glossed over like an actual bloomin' onion. We have all of Australia represented as 3 different characters. Like,
it's true.
Like, I feel like this would be better suited to Outback Steakhouse than McDonald's at this point. But like,
oh man. All right, so that's all I know about the Overwatch 2 Happy Meal, but I'm excited for it.
That'll be cool.
Next headline. Is Fox Girl support real? Last week we said no. This week we say yes. Here is what I have pieced together from all the news that I have read. There was a 4chan leak a few weeks ago that announced the new Fox Girl support is coming, and her name is Kimiko.
Yes.
And John Spector replied to that 4chan announcement and said, that's not true. And everybody's like, aw. And then, like 2 days ago, the Fox Girls support cinematic was leaked to YouTube, and they're like, oh, her name isn't Kimiko, it's Kikoro. And now that might be real. It seems like that's probably real. So Fox Girls support is back. You're just not a Kimiko main, or you're not a Kimiko main, you're a Kikoro main. That's apparently what we know about Fox Girl support. Also, she's going to be behind a Battle Pass paywall. Good luck.
Rip in pieces.
Yeah. Last thing for the headlines. Spend your tokens. Merge your accounts. It's your weekly reminder. Spend your tokens. Merge your accounts. And that's all the headlines.
Hold on. Before we go a little bit farther, we sped through the Fox Girl thing. I want to clarify this because I kept a close eye sort of on this whole situation because it was very funny to me because everybody was again freaking out about it. The original leak from, I think you said 4chan, what that was basically like a screenshot of like the hero selection screen, and it had like a character model that basically looked like they copy pasted from Genshin Impact, and they called
it super did,
yeah, and they said this is what that is. That was the thing that was confirmed to be fake. And you can still find that, by the way. Like, that is still available to the general public to find, so you can look that up on your own time and like find the image yourself and judge to figure out where they copy pasted from. The actual, I suspect that the cinematic is real because everybody that posted content about it and like screenshots of it got a copyright claim on Twitter, on YouTube, everywhere. So I have reason to believe that that is actually legit. Just solely on the fact that copyright claims actually went out, and you are gonna have a hard time finding the actual images of that now. So, but also but also be prepared for this to be a regularly recurring cycle of events. Now that we're going to a battle pass system where every handful of weeks we're going to be getting something like this is another thing that's going to come over from the other live service game communities. This happens all the time, so you're going to start seeing a lot of this. So just, be ready. I know this was another point of contention in the Overwatch community. People said, leakers ruin the fun for everyone. Guess what? It's here to stay now. We've never really had leaker situations in the Overwatch community. They've done a pretty good job of keeping that close to the belt. So that era is also at an end. So now,
gird your loins, if you will.
Yes, indeed. So with that said, let's talk about the Summer Showdown, which is now over and done with. And yeah, let's call it a pretty good tournament overall. I thought it was a really, really good tournament.
I had a good time.
Yeah, it was a lot of Overwatch to consume in 4 days, but you know what? It was objectively very good tournament. And by the way, good time to point out, no game of the week this week. We're just gonna recap the whole tournament because so much happened in those 4 days that it was hard to pick a specific game to talk about.
Yeah, so I had some really interesting takeaways from this tournament. I agree with you. I think it was a fun time. It was a good tournament. They were good games pretty much all around, which was kind of a nice change because the last 2 tournaments that we've had have kind of just been the LA Gladiators show.
Right.
And boy, was it nice to not have a purple tournament for once. I'm not going to lie. So the first thing that I really want to talk about is the fact that the Washington Decays almost knocked out the Dallas Fuel in round 1.
Right.
Now, I didn't watch this game live. I have since gone back and watched it, but you were giving me live reactions via our text chat of watching this game live. What are your thoughts, Brad, on Washington's performance in the 2 games that they played?
So it was, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you called them the Washington Decays. I don't think really the entire team showed up to this tournament. The only time that they had any measurable success was when Decay was on the crazy flank, just killing everything. Assassin did all right. He definitely had pop-off moments and got a couple of 4K, 5K blades and whatnot, but overall, the biggest factor for the team in the tournament was Decay, and I don't think anybody can argue that. Kalios up until this tournament had some of the craziest Junker Queen stats in the league, which nobody was paying attention to because Han been so effective on the fuel. But overall, I was not particularly impressed with Washington. I think I mentioned this in the chat when I was basically live tweeting the Dallas game. Dallas had the hardest time dealing with them because Dallas plays such by the book Junker Goats, and Washington's style is not that. Washington's style is very much everybody takes turns on the flank and gets 4 kills, and then hey, we just won the team fight because no one can deal with us. The second that Washington realized that Decay needed to not play the game, it was over it was a completely different ball game. Edison switched to the Sojourn and actually checked Decay, and then suddenly all of the value just kind of deteriorated very quickly. And even in their losers bracket game, who did they play? Was it Toronto?
Yeah, and they got rolled by Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto didn't give Decay the time of day. That was another case. They, right off the bat, they were just he dies, and he did. And they checked him, and it was different ball game. They couldn't play the game. And I think having a player deadlift like that, while it's conducive to most teams in Overwatch 2, pub teams, it's not, Overwatch League doesn't have the same effect. It's such a heavily team-focused, coordination-based game, especially with Junker Goats, that having that deadlift is just when someone figures it out, it's game over.
Yeah, every day I am more and more surprised that Decay hasn't switched to playing Valorant yet. because Decay is a fucking freak, dude. Like, Decay is so good at clicking heads.
Yep.
The Washington Justice are not a good Overwatch League team. I agree with what you said. I mean, Decay's performance in the Dallas game was heroic. Like, the 4K overclock on Perizu was one of the most heinous clips I've ever seen in my life. It was disgusting. However, they went up against the Toronto Defiant and got rolled, and they got reverse swept by Dallas. I think Vigilante played pretty well.
Yeah.
I think Kalios was fine. I think Assassin was fine.
I will say Opener was a big problem for them this tournament. Opener, who has historically looked okay, did not show up. Like, his brain was not on the LAN with the rest of the team. Like, there were so many like just bad beats, like to the point where it was just like, you've just screwed your team out of the next 2 team fights. Like, I don't know what was going on. Maybe it was nerves because LAN on Toronto's like in the live stands, because it's a very different scenario than they've played actually this season. I don't think they made the first LAN tournament it was in Texas, right? They weren't in kickoff, were they?
I don't remember if they went to Dallas or not, to be honest with you. I'll look. I'm pulling it up right now.
But yeah, like I don't think they've been in a
They did play in Dallas.
Oh, they did.
They lost 3-2 to the Shock in the first round, and then lost 3-1 to Florida in losers. So they did the exact same thing in Kickoff Clash that they did in Summer Showdown.
I mean, history repeats itself, I guess, but I'll call it what it is. Like I said, I don't think Opener had the best showing. And like, at the end of the day, we've seen how effective supports are in this meta, and it's specific, and in Overwatch 2. They're a really, 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 really important component, and if you're not getting value, you are kind of a detriment.
Yeah, that's pretty much my takeaway. I think that Washington is super meta dependent right now because they only have 5 people on their roster. Luckily for them, Decay is not meta dependent. However, I've said it every episode of this podcast, Washington's problem is they over rely on Decay, and like, boy, Decay almost got him past Dallas in the first round, but you just can't do a team like that. Speaking of Dallas, I jumped right into Washington, and that's my bad, because I didn't say that the Shanghai Dragons and the Dallas Fuel are your Summer Showdown champions. So congratulations to the Dallas Fuel and the Shanghai Dragons. And goddamn, did the Dallas Fuel look really good in this tournament.
They sure did. Hanbin and Edison were just on a whole other level. Talking about the grand finals for a second, like, I can't even look at what happened and say that the Shock played badly. There were moments that Dallas pulled victory from absolute defeat, and I have never seen clutches like that ever. Against especially a team like the Shock. There's a moment that stands out in my mind. It was on the first point of actually, I think of God, what is it?
Give me something to go on.
Control map. It was the control center on Lijiang.
There you go.
It was 99-99, and Shock had just had just basically locked up a team fight. Like, I think they had killed 3, and Hanbin just shoots in with a rampage and kills the entire team. And I watched that live and I went, huh? Because I thought the map was over. Like, I truly did. I was like, oh, Shock have won this. Like, because they were up one map, and it should have been like an easy map win for them. And Hanbin just pulls that out, and they go on to win the map and shut out the Shock. It was absurd. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, man, I don't think that the 4-0 in grand finals is really indicative of the game that was played.
No.
Dallas outplayed Shock for sure, but like the Shock did not. I don't want to say the Shock didn't get rolled because they kind of got rolled, but it wasn't like the Shock didn't show up.
No.
Didn't play good Overwatch. Like, Proper popped off in grand finals. Proper stats were insane, and that wasn't enough to get past the Dallas Fuel, who literally all season have been a wet fart of a team.
True.
And suddenly Hanbin gets on Junker Queen, and they just delete people from the game. It's insanity.
I will take a second. Like, I will say that there are... So, Shock have suffered a little bit in the grand finals. And actually, you know, the semifinals as well. They suffer a little bit from that Washington issue that we were talking about earlier with the single player pop off. Like, the difference being that all of the players on the Shock are good.
Yeah.
And I can't really say the same for Washington. I mean, they're good players. They're Overwatch League, whatever. They're better than me. But like the entirety of Shock plays so much better as a team together than most teams in the league do currently. And you know, but they did suffer from having to rely a lot on Proper killing 5. You know, that's you can't do that. We see here that just doesn't work, even in the grand final situation with a team as good as the Shock. I will also say that I think Violet struggled a fair bit in this tournament. I know I've kind of used him as a punching bag in the past, but for most of this meta, he's looked really, really good. And now late in the game, he's started doing this really weird stuff where he's positioned so far up and he's just making himself an easy target for Edison. Like, again, works against lower tier teams, but when you have a person who can click heads as well as Edison does, you can't expose your cranium like that and just play these over aggressive positions. Like, he had a couple of really questionable beat decisions as well that kind of screwed the Shock as well. And he's not the only thing that went wrong. Again, Dallas played on an entirely other level. That cannot be overstated enough at this point. I definitely think there were a handful of mistakes that the Shock had that were exploitable, but again, you know, Dallas was just outplaying the ever-living hell out of them, which otherworldly other level stuff.
Yeah, man, I was really blown away by Dallas, and I'm trying to pull up their roster, and the Overwatch League website is dog balls, and I always forget about that. Yeah, like, everybody on the Dallas Fuel seemed like they were playing their mains in this meta. And I think that the Dallas Fuel have struggled because of what you said way back when we were talking about headlines. Overwatch 2 is not as team synergy dependent as Overwatch 1 is. And the Dallas Fuel are still running an 8-man roster. I mean, like, they have Fearless and Hanbin, two of the best tanks in the league. Hanbin's been riding bench basically all season. And like, you finally make your way into Junker Goats, where team synergy is of the utmost importance. Sparkle gets to play Genji, and I kind of feel like Sparkle is the best Genji that's ever been in the Overwatch League. You get to put Chio on Lucio, and he's just like a positioning freak. Everything that we've talked about, all the weaknesses we've talked about this whole phase for teams have been, their Lucio's out. Their Lucio's out. The first pick is their Lucio, and they're done. You know, like, that's why the Gladiators had a lot of problems, because Funny Astro just didn't play this right. But Chio has perfect positioning on Lucio all the time. Fielder's Brig looked really, really good. Junker Queen looks like it was programmed to be for Edison.
Hanbin.
Or for Hanbin. And Edison's hit scan just happened to be really good.
Yep.
Like, Dallas looked fucking phenomenal, unstoppably phenomenal. When this meta changes, I have no idea what Dallas is going to look like, and that kind of sucks.
We'll talk about that in a minute, though. Like, we're going to get to some power ranking, but I agree with you. I do.
Yeah, but, like, Kilo got his brains diffed out in this match, and that's barely Kilo's fault. You know, like, Violet, again, like you said, not the cleanest Lucio play, but still a high-level Lucio player, and just couldn't compare. I've been talking about Dallas a lot. I want to talk about some of the other teams.
Yeah. Let's go about it this way. Who were some of your biggest surprises of this tournament?
Florida for sure was
okay.
I think my biggest surprise. My notes in here on the show notes is, hey, is the Florida Mayhem good at Overwatch?
No. But go on.
So Florida has kind of been flirting with this double flex support thing, right? Like, it's one of the only there's basically been Jotes, there's been Fro Yotes, and then there's been the double flex support Jotes. And I did not expect it to go very well. I also remember reading an interview with whoever the head coach of Florida is, which I don't remember, where somebody asked them, like, you know, do you feel like double flex support is viable in this meta? Like, do you feel like you've cracked the meta? And the head coach basically said, no, not really, but it's working for us. And when you have to go into a tournament as like a 6, 7, 8 tier team, seed team, and go up against the Dallas Fuel, the San Francisco Shock, if you find something that works for you, you end up playing your game. And it worked for Florida.
Yeah.
They didn't play a ton of the double flex support, but it came up in chat here. Like, they were trying to switch support line to Ana Zen and got punished for it, but kept trying on new maps and new teams. And they did keep forcing it, but, like, they won 2 games, which is more than a number of other teams won, and they goddamn near almost beat Toronto. Like, that was 99-99 on the 3rd map of a 5th map of Control. Like, Florida looked really good in this tournament, not just because they played the double flex support, but it felt like they showed up to this tournament saying, hey, we don't have any expectations, but we're going to see what works, and it kind of worked for them.
I'm going to piggyback off of what you were saying about, like, them showing up. I am going to talk a little bit more about Florida, but I want to make a general statement. I think by far and away this tournament, almost, I can't say that any team really didn't show up. Like, I know we were very critical of Washington, but even they looked better than they have as of late. I cannot fault pretty much any team, even the ones that got knocked out early, like, for their performances in this tournament. Everybody basically showed up to play some really quality Overwatch, and I want to say kind of generally that's why this tournament, I think, was probably the best one we've seen this year. It's obviously not our favorite meta, but, like, everybody came to play, and that's, you can't always say that. There's always some outliers, and even the teams knocked out early were still showed up and played a game and played well. So, like, but going back to the Mayhem, like, they were probably also my biggest surprise as well. They're certainly the first team that ruined my bracket.
Yeah, man.
Like, I had them getting knocked out of the losers bracket round 1. I was completely convinced of that, and they outperformed every expectation that I had for them. And they were a completely different team than showed up in the weeks prior. Absolutely 180 from what we had seen. So I can't really, I don't have a lot to say about them. You know, someone played a great game on Junker Queen. Surmajed was like the standout performance, I think, of the entire team. Really, like, they only lost the game where he wasn't on the LAN with the rest of the team. So I don't know if it was a LAN diff, but, like, kid played his brains out when he was on stage. So, like, big shout out to him as well. I don't have much else to say. The double flex support thing was, it's certainly a choice. It's the one or two variants that we've seen this entire meta. I'm certainly not mad about it. Does it work? Not really, but they tried it. They gave it the good old college try, and that's about all I have to say on it.
Yeah, man, and I do think there's a lot of value to creative comps in Overwatch if you're gonna come into a tournament and man, you're not gonna out main support Dallas. You're not gonna out main support San Francisco. So sure, yeah, try something different. It works, it doesn't work, who cares? I am glad Sir Majed was able to make it to the LAN. I know there were some issues visa-wise or something getting him into Canada, so I'm glad he was able to make it. I also want to shout out to Hydron. I think I think Sir Majed and Hydron are two of my front runners for most improved players over the season.
I'll go with that.
I feel like both of them have really grown into the league and have just looked a lot better than they looked in the first phase, and I think that's great. The other big thing that I really want to talk about in this tournament was how big a boost for Toronto the home field advantage was, because Toronto looked really good in this tournament, and they came in looking good. I mean, we knew that Toronto was going to show up to this tournament. They've looked good the last couple of weeks. Hisu's looked really, really good. Chorong's looked like maybe the best Lucio in the meta. Toronto's looked good, but when they hit that stage and people started really going loud for Toronto, you could see the difference in their play, and that was cool. It was fun. I'm glad that we're getting some lands back. I know that COVID has been COVID, but if we really want esports to be a viable thing that continues into the future, live events and lands like this are so crucial for this very reason, where Washington can show up and Decay cannot miss on land because it's physically impossible for him. Toronto can show up and have 1,000 people cheer for them, and suddenly they're 3-0ing the Houston Outlaws. The Houston Outlaws forgot how to play the game,
Right.
It was just really cool to see that for Toronto, and I think that they played really well in the Florida game. I think Florida played really well against them to drive it all the way to 5 maps. And honestly, I thought Toronto looked really good against the Shock in the losers final.
Yeah. I mean, again, the scoring isn't totally indicative of how close these games actually were. I think honestly, another big general statement in this meta particularly, it shadows the score differential shadows just how close these matches are, just across the board. It has been a remarkably close meta at times for these teams, and it's not always been kind of highlighted in how the final scores are.
Yeah, for sure. So that's really what I have for the West. The East played a tournament this weekend, and I suppose that we should talk about it, but I've got to be really honest. I'm having a hard time saying anything about APAC other than Seoul and Shanghai are really good. Everybody else is either really bad or okay. Somebody put in chat, boys retreat to the next tourney. Hell yeah. As soon as there's a LAN I'm capable of going to, I'm going.
I would like to say, I almost went to Toronto this weekend. I was actively looking at tickets to go to Toronto this past weekend, and if the hotel hadn't been so expensive, I would have gone.
See, that's why the Justice need to get good, because there's actually a really nice esports arena in DC that they could host a LAN at, and then we'd all be able to go. But that's another conversation. Anyway, Seoul and Shanghai, they won every game that wasn't against each other. Everybody else lost. What else is there to say about APAC, man? There's 4 teams in the tournament. I don't know.
We are going to talk about this, because the secret sauce has been discovered for Philly. Okay, Philly was my biggest surprise of the past few weeks because they completely turned it around. They were on the border of not making the tournament, and they had a decent run in the tournament. That being said, like, obviously the APAC side is so much shorter because there are so few teams, but like, Philly showed up. They've finally decided, hey, maybe we shouldn't play Carpe because we actually want to win. And MN3 had a really, 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 really great tournament. I just want to say that. There isn't a lot to say about APAC. Everything we kind of expected played out as expected. Soul and Soul and the Dragons looked phenomenal. We knew that was going to happen. They played each other. One of the two of us guessed right. Spoiler alert, wasn't me. Doesn't matter. Like, I don't have a ton to say. It played out basically as expected, minus the fact that, you know, the Charge did okay. They were out early because Jimmy fucks, but not that much. And
Jimmy can only fuck so hard.
Jimmy can only fuck so hard, but Philly played well. The Dragons, this was their meta, kind of in the same way that it was Dallas's meta, right? Like, Lee Jae-gon unbelievably good. Like, it was just, they just had a good tournament. I don't have much more to say about it. They were dominant. They were dominant in the same fashion that Dallas was. And it was in the chat, it was an exciting finals to watch. Absolutely. Because, I mean, two best teams in APAC going at it again. Like, it was a good finals. It was a fun finals to watch. I enjoyed it. I don't have much else to say, though. Like, I really don't. I wish I did, but there's just, with so few teams on the APAC side, it's hard to really make headlines about it.
Yeah.
And the time difference. The time difference watching the games makes it difficult. Not watching them live, it takes some of the wind out of it for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, like, look, we've talked about APAC a bunch on this podcast, and we've talked about Overwatch League a bunch on this podcast, and Overwatch League needs to be restructured, and APAC suffers the most from that. It's just not a full division, and I think a lot of these teams are struggling to elevate themselves past where they're locked in the order. I'm having a hard time watching APAC games because I know who's going to win every single time. Unless, yeah, Philly plays Carpe instead of MN3, or like Jimmy's on the bench, or, you know, whatever. I did feel like Shanghai was going to win this tournament. So, I mean, I called that, I suppose. But like when it's Shanghai and Seoul, I don't know. I personally am a little burnt out on APAC right now. I have been enjoying watching contenders more than I've been enjoying watching APAC.
That is fair.
Which is yeah.
All right. Well, before we move on, there are two teams that we didn't talk about. I want to touch upon them briefly before we do, and we're going to move back over to NA for a second. Starting with the Vancouver Titans. I feel bad. I feel bad for the Vancouver Titans, not going to lie.
Yeah.
I think they looked stellar against the Shock, despite the fact that they lost the first match. That was one that everyone, including them, knew that they probably weren't going to win. But even so, even being the underdogs, they managed to pull a map from Shock, and also just generally close game, very generally close game, all things considered. And then mayhem happened.
Yeah, they did.
So give me your thoughts on that. Where it was did you expect that, or like was their path kind of set in stone before they got there? What do you think?
I think it kind of was. You know, strength of schedule is really important in leagues this small, and I think that Vancouver was kind of doomed from the beginning, right? Because, like, you're going up against San Francisco Shock in round one, and they got a map off them, and that's not nothing. I agree. Vancouver looked really good. they just only looked really good in comparison to Vancouver itself. So they lose to San Francisco. They either play Houston or Florida. Houston 3-0 Florida in that first winners round, and then Houston just like quit playing. It was a little bit weird. I don't really know what happened to the Outlaws. It was very strange. And if I went back and I watched all the games, maybe I could tell you, but I didn't. Florida, on the other hand, lost their first game and was like, never again. And I think that first game against Vancouver, the Florida-Vancouver game, and losers won, that was Sir Majed's first game on land.
Yeah,
right?
it was.
Well, there's your difference right there.
I guess,
you know? And I agree, man. Vancouver looked good, and I'm glad to see Vancouver moving up. Like, Vancouver and Washington are going in opposite directions, the way I see it. As Vancouver climbs up the ladder, Washington ticks down the ladder. And I was glad to see them make the tournament. I hope that they continue to, like, push forward. But whether they played Florida or Houston in losers 1, it was going to be a really hard game for them. And then they were going to have to play London or Dallas. And, like, brr. So, yeah, that's what I have for Vancouver. I'm proud of the performance they put on this weekend. I think they looked good. Did I expect anything else from them? Absolutely not. I didn't.
Vancouver was the only team to ruin my North American bracket. I wanna say, because they lost that first game, I technically only got 3 games wrong in that entire bracket. And
damn,
I am so mad. I am so mad about it. Admittedly, I was kind of off the goop when I did my losers bracket, because I had them like ending up in 4th place, because I really had I had a lot of faith in them. I had a lot of faith in them. But yeah, I admittedly I was a little bit high on some copium and hopium there. So I'm not gonna completely fault them. That's a little bit on me. I do want to transition over to London though, because we had another one in chat about how London versus Toronto was a top game. If we had to analyze a game of the week, it was going to be that one.
Yeah, it sure was.
Because holy Jesus, did London look good. And this was another case that honestly, they looked good until they didn't this tournament. They were so good. I think the way that they went out was very unfortunate, because I don't think how they went out was indicative at all of how they started this tournament. It was like it was a 2 different team situation. I was actually kind of disappointed in the game that they lost. I think they went all the wrong directions when they started to try and play the May again. Like, for once, they looked really, really good on the mirror match, and the second they started to play May again, I was like, why are you doing this to yourself? You've now flipped how you want to play this game on its head. I don't like it.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that all phase we've been saying, like, what is the real benefit of Froyotes? And I think that
there's your one. There's your one. You said it.
Actually, that's number 2 for this game. I think that this match is like the perfect example of, like, May wasn't it. You know, like, you thought you had a fun, cheeky thing. You thought you could bring back Boneback, but Boneback didn't come back. And Florida looked really goddamn good. Like, London looked really good. Florida looked really good. I think London made some silly decisions, and I think it cost them the game. Now, if London beats Florida and then goes on to losers 3 and London has to play Toronto, I think Toronto might still win that game, because I think Toronto looked better than London did. But I agree with you on all counts. London looked really good in this tournament. I just think they made dumb choices.
I think it was weird because their play style changed like halfway, and I don't know why they chose to do that, because when they decided they wanted to set the pace, it was a completely different team, and they were taking better positions. They were playing more proactively, and the minute that they hit the mayhem, it was like they switched completely to reactive again. And we've seen in the past when they play reactive, it just doesn't work. They end up giving so much space for just free, and it's like they don't know how to play certain maps because when they play reactive, it falls apart. They just don't get any value, and everybody dies. You know, it was really a shame to watch, because I thought they had figured it out. I thought they had sorted their problems, and then the old habits just came back, and they started to play Junker Goats just the way they had been playing Rush, and just ceding all of this ground for free. And I just didn't. It was a very disappointing way to go out, honestly. I don't know why they did it, but you know, maybe the pressure from the lower bracket run was starting to get to them or something. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they were partying the night before. Who knows? Who's to say?
Yeah, and you know, they played Dallas winners round 2, and they got stomped.
Yeah,
like they did get a map off Dallas, but I think that London looked worse in the Dallas game than they looked in either of their other games.
I think that's a hard one to compare to. That was always going to be the case. Like I think no matter how this tournament shook out, it was always going to be shock Dallas in the finals. Like that was never going to be a question. I think those two teams are just generally on another level. So you know, we're talking in the mid tier though. Like mid tier versus those top tier teams, it's no contest. It's two completely different games.
Right. No, and I agree with you. The reason that I bring it up, right, is that I think London looked worse against Dallas than they did against anybody else. And then their next game was against a Florida team that had just beaten Vancouver and was really gassed up on themselves. So
fair.
I think that London came off a hard loss against a Florida that is coming off a really good win. And I think that might have led to some of those silly choices, right? Like that everything's not working out, like shit's crumbling around us. We thought we were doing well. Where Florida, on the other hand, is like, everything we do works. Everything we touch is gold. And I think it just caught up with London. I do want to give a shout out to Hottie. I love Hottie. Now that Super's gone and Space only plays when LA makes good decisions, Hottie's my favorite tank player. And I remember at the beginning of this season, everybody was like, man, Hottie can only play Rhine. His monkey's okay. His ball exists, but he can only play Rhine, and he has no variability. And I don't think that has been the case. And I think that Hottie adapted really well to Junker Queen. At the same time, I think that Hottie tried to play Junker Queen a little bit more like he plays Rhine, and it cost him. I think Hottie throughout this tournament had probably, I don't have the numbers, but I'm guessing that Hottie had the least number of connections from his rampages compared to everybody else. He had a couple of no-man rampages. He had a couple of one-man rampages because he kind of treats it like Shatter, where it's like you can just call somebody out and beat them down. And anyway, I really like Hottie. I've really enjoyed watching Hottie play. It's been a lot of fun. And
Man did 25 push-ups on stage while he was flexing on Toronto. Like, come on now. Come on now.
Yeah, man. Like, I think that it's easy to look at this tournament and London's performance, and if you don't blame the May, it's easy to blame Hottie, and I think that's unwarranted. So, you know, there you go.
There was an interview with one of their former coaches last week. Custa did an interview with him for about an hour and was talking about the Spitfire, and he was asked the question, like, why should people root for Spitfire? And he's like, I think of pretty much all the teams in NA, this is one of the most likable. Like, these are all like just genuinely good people. He's like, he's like, that's not to say that anybody else in NA are like dicks or anything, but like, as an entire team, like they're both kind of like the underdog team, and they're also there's just like a huge personality. That I think is the biggest difference. There's just like a huge personality on the team, and you know, some of these god tier players, it's like you watch their post game interviews, it's like watching statues, and like these guys, like there's just a lot of like smiles and again, who else got up and just did push-ups on stage just for like that that kind of stuff? Like that's great content. Like all things aside, like they've got their PR team has like the easiest job because they create content on their own, which is really cool to see. You don't see a lot of that in esports in general. Yeah.
Well, that's all I have to say about the tournament. Are you ready to move on?
Let's go into our power rankings. Moving into the next tournament. Let me get the power ranking screen up.
Yeah, so while Brad is pulling things up, let me say the Overwatch League is taking next week off, and so are we.
True.
We will not be here on the 19th. We're actually both going to be out of town, so we are not going to have a show next week. But with that in mind, let's hit some power rankings for when games return on Thursday, September 22nd. Also, a friendly reminder that the devs have already announced a Junker Queen nerf patch that will go live before the next phase. So everything is made up and nothing matters.
We should know this week. Yeah, we should know this week probably what that change is going to be. It's very likely that the pros already know because they've probably had some time to scrim on it. Not so much the tournament teams, but the teams not present in the tournament have probably already been working on it. But usually Tuesdays and Thursdays are the information days for the Overwatch devs, so I'd be keeping an eye out on that as well. We'll see. Go ahead. What were you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I interrupted you, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say, for those curious, Pred records after last week.
Oh yeah.
I moved to 18-11. Brad moved to 21-8. And the question of did we beat our Friends Dumb bracket? Yes, Brad won this phase in our Friends Dumb bracket challenge. I forgot to fill out my Summer Showdown tournament bracket, and I will admit defeat there. All right, let's do power rankings.
Sweet victory from SpongeBob playing in the background. It would be actually if it wasn't DMCA. But anyway, all right. So let's start with the East because it's gonna take a lot less time. It's gonna take a lot less time. Shanghai Dragons.
Shanghai Dragons Seoul Dynasty tier break done.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh God. What is happening?
Oh geez. Oh no. Oh God.
Okay, I fixed it. We're good.
Okay,
we're good.
All right.
I'm gonna put Shanghai Dragons on top and Seoul Dynasty, right beneath them. Yeah. I think this order is pretty easy to deal with. Shanghai has finally convinced me. I'm now off of the Seoul Dynasty goop. This is now the second time that they have bested Seoul, and in 2 different metas. So I'm gonna give it to Shanghai. Shanghai are looking pretty dominant now. I think they've finally kind of gotten it together, and I expect regardless of the meta, it's going to just sort of repeat because APAC, for as inconsistent as APAC has been the most consistent.
Yeah. If there's one rule, it's that the Shanghai Dragons and the Seoul Dynasty are on top. I'll be honest with you, I think that should be a double tier break. I'm dead serious.
I'll give it to you.
I like nobody else in APAC is at the same level as Shanghai and Seoul. It's just not even close.
No. This I will say though, the next tier becomes a lot more difficult. Well, only slightly. I'm gonna put Philadelphia Fusion in third. I think when they make the right decisions, I mean they are in the realm of as good as Seoul and Shanghai. Not on the same level by any means, but when they make the right decisions, they can at least compete. You know what I mean? Like they can, I can't say the same for any of these other teams. When these other teams make the right decisions, they can win games, but I don't think they even come close to touching the top 2 teams. Philadelphia Fusion can at least get a couple maps off of either of these, and that's not nothing. It's not much, but it's not nothing. What we're working with at these bottom tiers is a lot of arbitrary numbers, so you got to pick and choose where you can.
Okay, so if I'm being really honest, I think I might put the Guangzhou Charge above the Philadelphia Fusion, and I'm going to tell you why.
Please.
Reason number 1, Jimmy fucks.
Obviously.
Reason number 2, we know that the next meta is going to change.
Yeah.
Right? The right decision of the Fusion so far has been MN3 versus Carpe. And then when they make that right decision and play MN3 on hit scan, it goes fine, but that also requires Zest to pop off.
But Zest has been popping off. He's looked very good as well. Like, Zest.
He's looked really good on Genji.
His Tracer was fantastic. His Tracer was great too, though. Like, his Tracer was integral in like the past two tournaments. Like, they've relied very heavily on Zest. I think the bigger question mark is Bella's Rhea at times. I think
so, and that was going to be my next point, is that, like, I think Bella's Rhea got kind of lucky that Junker Queen is not a tech heavy tank. Like, Bella's Rhea's dive has not looked great. His rush did not look great. If we go back to not GOATs, I think Philly might struggle. I really do. And hey, Jimmy fucks.
Jimmy do be fucking. That's I mean,
I will accept Guangzhou as 4th, but I wanted to put it out there that I believe that they could outfuck the Philadelphia Fusion.
I mean, if you went off of I mean, this is obviously like recency bias. Like, Philadelphia beat Guangzhou pretty convincingly. But I mean, I just have a hard time. I have a hard time putting Guangzhou above Philadelphia right now, just because of Philadelphia's tournament presence the last 2 times. Both times they've made a solid run. Philadelphia made a solid run against NA teams last time, and that's not something that happens particularly often. Well, obviously because we don't have global tournaments as often anymore, but like,
yeah,
that's not. We have been pretty vocal about the fact that, like, APAC is not as strong of a region as the West is. Like, it's just not. We are both in agreement about that. I think a lot of the league officials are as well at this point. But Philly is the only team here that really made a solid run against the West last time. Shanghai did as well. So, like, that's why you can make the argument for, in a different meta, maybe them being higher. We haven't seen Guangzhou play against the West yet. And I think that's kind of where I'm putting, why I'm willing to put Philly above them, because we just haven't seen them take a run at it.
I'm also realizing that we've barely seen. So I'm gonna agree with you as Guangzhou in 4th. I'm cool with that, and I'm gonna back off of my own demands, partially because I looked at Guangzhou's roster and realized I only know 2 of these people, and forgot that Guangzhou, like, fire sailed their whole roster and started over.
Right.
So, like, Brad, right now, can you name, there are 6 people on Guangzhou's roster.
Sure can.
One of them is Jimmy. One of them is Faraway 1987. Can you name any of the other 4?
No, because I'm really bad at APAC. I'm really bad at APAC. And we just, I haven't seen enough of Guangzhou. I've seen some of their games. It's again, the time difference makes it very difficult to watch them live. So the catch-up work is a lot more difficult. But this will change especially if they continue to perform well. But like, I can't name their roster the whole way down. I really can't.
So then let me give you this for the rest of the tiers.
Okay.
What if we do?
You want to do another
Fusion,
tier break, or do you want to just keep this tier together?
I think we go Fusion, Charge, Chengdu Hunters.
Really?
Tier break. Valiant Spark.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Why do you put the Chengdu Hunters in 5th? I want you to show your work here.
Put them in 5th, or, like, let me ask you this. Do you want me to tell you why I'm putting them in 5th, or do you want me to tell you why I'm putting them a tier break above?
I think it's kind
Hangzhou and LA.
At this point, it's kind of the same reasoning. I'm just curious. What do you got for me?
Well, I'm putting Chengdu 5th because it's what comes after 4th. I'm putting Chengdu above LA and Hangzhou because they were the only other team to win a second game in this phase. Hangzhou and LA looked awful this whole phase. They just did. And I'm personally pissed off at the Hangzhou Spark because I think they've lost every game I've predded them this whole season.
I mean, they did that to me. They did that to me this tournament for sure.
So I like Hangzhou Spark and LA Valiant. I don't have any faith in being able to beat Philly or Guangzhou. Chengdu, I could see beating Philly or Guangzhou. Maybe not like all the time and maybe not easily, but I can see a world where it happens versus Hangzhou and LA that I have no faith in.
So right now, I'm willing to give you Chengdu in 5th, but I'm actually going to put the tier break above them.
Okay, that's fair. I'll take that.
Because I mean, these 3 didn't make the tournament, first of all. So
yeah.
that's part of the problem. But also, like, this is going to be so meta dependent what happens in the next stage, which is why I have a hard time kind of with these bottom few teams in general. Because Hangzhou had a really good showing last meta. Like, they were phenomenal and surprised everybody, us included. Again, with another like solid tournament run in the global. They just really struggled this meta for whatever reason. You know, they just couldn't string together the Junker Ghosts the way they needed to. And so, you know, obviously they had a hard time. Chengdu is, oh God, they're another team that I just can't get a read on. They should be better than they are, but they just keep underperforming. And sometimes they show up, sometimes they'll upset, sometimes they just, you know, they get swept. It's like, I can't get a read on them. It's kind of like the Atlanta Reign in some aspects. So I don't know. I'm willing to put these 3 kind of in a tier of their own just because anything could happen. LA is pretty consistently meh. Nothing has really changed there. So like I don't know. You know, it's, again, we should point out we don't know what the meta is going to bring. There are hints that it'll be moving back to something much more mobile than Junker Goats, which, you know, good. More interesting to watch, hopefully a little bit more diversity. But if that changes, then this whole thing could change as well. So
I have a feeling, this is my wild theory, but I have a feeling that we're going to get an Orisa meta.
That'd be fun. I'd take that. I'd be curious to see what happens with that. My only, you know, I hope for it because it would be different, and I would like to see what they do with that, especially with the Orisa changes. I just don't think it's gonna happen. I think she's not mobile enough. I think she's just right in that middle region where she's not Rush, she's not Dive, and she's not Junker Goats. And I think that middle gray area suits pubs very well, but when you get to the hyper coordinated extent of the league, she becomes a case of wait out the cooldowns and then she dies. And at that point, it doesn't matter if they buffer into the stratosphere or not. There's just too much coordination to like make that happen. But it would be fun. I'd like to see it at the very least. And then I think we're just gonna see something like Winston Ball Dive again, something in that realm. Maybe even a diva. Maybe a diva thing. I think it could be a potential.
We haven't really had a diva meta.
She had a moment in the last one, but like only a moment and only with certain teams. So like. Maybe that. Who's to say? If we have that, then you're going to see a lot more space, which would be cool.
Yeah. So for the audio listeners, I'll read it off real quick. East region, where we're at, and I like this. I'm cool keeping it here. We have Shanghai Dragons, Seoul Dynasty, Double Tier Break, Philadelphia Fusion, Guangzhou Charge, Tier Break, Chengdu Hunters, Hangzhou Spark, LA Valiant.
Love it. Let's kickball change over to the West then. I mean,
can I just say, let me say this. The meta is changing.
Yep.
Right? We know the meta is going to change. And with that, everything could totally shift.
Yep.
That said, I feel as though after the performance we've seen over the last 6 to 8 weeks, I feel like we have to put Dallas Fuel in first. They deserve it.
I have some problems with that. Again, recency bias because they just won the tournament pretty substantially. However, they have proven to be so meta dependent that if this shifts, like, they could be back to where they were. Like, if Genji's not in the meta and Sparkle doesn't get to do Sparkle things on the Genji, I see them being in trouble. They have Fearless, which means if we go back to a Winston thing, they are suited. I will put them in first place solely because they won. But I think what I want to do is kind of put Dallas Fuel, San Francisco, Los Angeles all in a tier and then have a tier break. And I think there's going to be some apprehension about the LA thing, but I have it as well, obviously, because they didn't make the tournament. But I don't think they almost did, because they made the right changes, and then the second that they did, they were absolutely rolling. So if they had done it a week sooner, we would be probably sitting here and it would probably be an entirely different conversation. And we know from history that they have just all of the parts to make a good team no matter what the meta is. Whether they choose to act on that early enough is another story. But if we're talking about teams that are going to create and define the meta, it's going to be one or all of these three are going to be the teams to look to for how this is going to play out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's have an honest conversation about recency bias, right? Like, if we look at the last phase, yes, the Dallas Fuel just won the tournament, and they did so handily. However, it's not like the Dallas Fuel looked shaky in this phase.
No, no. That was not. No, I mean.
And I know that's not what you're saying. I'm just saying that. Like, I'm just saying this for posterity's sake, right? Like, Dallas Fuel have looked really good. I agree with you. They are, of the top 3 teams, they are the most meta dependent. I have faith that no matter what the meta looks like, San Francisco and LA are going to be able to field a team of players who can play that meta well. I don't have that same kind of faith in Dallas. That said, they fucking curb stomped the whole league for 6 weeks. Like, you know, I like them up there. And I do agree with what you said about the Gladiators. I have that trepidation, but you're right. They chose not to make this tournament. Just straight up. I mean, the decisions they made were not good. They switched players around partially because they picked up Happy in the middle of this phase. That's irrelevant. Reiner was the problem. Reiner's rookie mistakes as a tank player, not necessarily his Junker Queen play, but just his, like, rookie level of knowledge, which is not a bash on Reiner. It's just the reality of his exposure, cost the Gladiators significantly. So I do think that they are fully capable of just picking the next meta and doing it better.
I think we're gonna put tier break after those 3. This is now where it's gonna get tricky, because so we're going into the Countdown Cup, which means these power rankings probably should be more entire season focused. Like we should be looking at everything kind of like what has happened over the course of the season, where we're at now, kind of, and now the trajectory going towards the playoffs. Meta be damned. This gets difficult. I am still willing, I think, to put Toronto in third, or in fourth rather. I
like that.
I think they look.
I feel really good about that.
I think they look fine. I think they've been trending upward the entire season. After that,
I like London Spitfire for fifth for that same reason.
I'm okay with that.
They've been trending in the right direction. You know, if you look at these other teams, like comparatively to the whole season, London has looked like they are heading in the right direction, while Houston, Atlanta, Washington have been looking like they're heading in the wrong direction. Florida does not always look like they're heading in any direction. Yeah. After London is when I start to struggle.
I think we'll put another tier break there. I think that's probably pretty reasonable. Because I do think that after that we reach some majorly inconsistent territory. It's not that these two teams are like leaps and bounds better than everybody else that's in the next tier. It's that they're more consistent. They're more predictable. After this, it's kind of up in the air. Houston had a great showing this cycle, and even like some parts of the tournament, they looked good. Like they improved on some of the issues that I had going into the tournament with their alt economy, but at the end of the day, those demons still did rear their ugly heads at the end of their run in the tournament, and that bit them in the ass. I'm fine with putting them after London. I think it's probably fair to put them higher up on this list because they did have a good stage and they do generally perform well. They just have those inconsistencies that give me pause.
Let's just stop where we are and go to the bottom.
That's fair.
Of NA. Let's work up, and then maybe that'll help us define the middle a little bit. I think Paris is clearly at the bottom, unfortunately for Paris. I legitimately just feel bad for Paris.
I mean, they're just in a feedback loop right now where they're trying to get it together and trying to play into tournaments and trying to, you know, while also redoing your roster and dealing with meta shifts and bringing an entire team up from contenders to just, you know, flop into a meta with league team. Like it's a whole mess that they need to sort out. Hopefully this cycle is better for them. Hopefully they have a chance. I don't think they make I don't think there's even an opportunity for them to make playoffs at this point. But like hopefully, you know, they can at least get away with something, a win or two this cycle. But yeah, I think they're bottom of the barrel. After that,
I think it's New York.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think
we were talking about meta dependency.
Yeah, talking about meta dependency. Also, Boston's had some like weird back office things going on. You know, with like whether or not Punk is playing, they picked up Mag,
whether or not Crimso's playing, whether or not
sorry, my alarm just went off and I got scared. I like legitimately was like, "What the fuck is happening?"
No, that's cool. I think Boston's another one. When they choose to make the right decisions, they can win games. Like when they choose to play the right players, they were like leaning into that all Korean roster for a second and it just didn't work. And then they played Punk again and hey, lo and behold, they actually win and look good. Like I think Punk is a very defining factor for that team, especially in 5v5, and I think as is Crimzo. And when they actually play the right players, they can really perform. So I like them there. Hope to see more from them this cycle.
And then
go ahead.
Sorry, do you have something? I was gonna say, follow me on this thought.
Okay.
Right? So you have Paris, New York, Boston. What about from there, Washington, Vancouver, tier break.
Do you really think Washington and Vancouver are in this realm?
I think that Washington is on their way to that realm, and I think Vancouver is on their way out of that realm. But I think right now they are both kind of in that realm. Like
Yeah.
you want to talk
Yeah.
about meta dependency. I think Washington is the most meta dependent team in the league right now because they only have 5 guys.
True.
So like they have no option if if we come out on some like real crazy shit. Like I don't know if we get what's the dumbest meta I can think of off the top of my head? Say we get like a Junkrat Pharah Roadhog double main support meta or some shit. Washington's fucked. Just like full scale fuckaroonied. I if Tracer is meta, if Junker Queen stays meta, if Widow is meta, maybe Washington plays really well and maybe shit clicks, but like, dude, it's volatile over there. And I think Vancouver's looking better. I don't think that I'm ready to put Vancouver above the tier break, but I think by the time we get to the tournament, I could be ready to put Vancouver above the tier break. I just don't think they're there yet.
I think I'm almost inclined to put like a little tier break, just Vancouver on their own, because they're a big maybe and a big question mark, right? Like I'm putting it here right now just for visual's sake, but like they are on their way up, and they did have a good seed in this tournament, and they had a good showing for most of the stage. And again, we talked about recency bias, but this is an upward trend. They were starting to trend upward at the end of the last stage too. They won, I believe they didn't win a game last stage, but they were like close. And and that was leaps and bounds from the first stage where they just didn't win anything and they were getting pummeled. So like, I think that the pieces are there, but there's a big question mark as to, was this meta a fluke for them, or are they genuinely like starting to play their own game and make their own decisions in a way that benefits them as a whole, to where we start to see more consistency overall. You know what? I'm not gonna put the tier break there. I think it is because there's just so much factor. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna take it all back. I think they should be there, but they shouldn't be above the tier break. You're probably right on that. It's because a lot of this just means that like, this is all fluid down here, really.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying. Like, you either put Vancouver at the top of that tier, the bottom of the tier above it, or on their own tier. Whatever you want to say. Like, I think Vancouver is primed to do well and to climb up and like get better. I just haven't seen enough to feel confident in them like doing it to put them above anybody else. But where you put them in regards to the tier break just doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
You've got Houston, Atlanta, Florida. I agree with Houston personally. I kind of want to switch Florida and Atlanta.
Okay.
I think Atlanta is stonks are trending down. I think
with Speedily showing up and them now having Vigilante.
I do. And I said earlier that Vigilante played well for Washington, and that was my bad, friends.
Oops.
I do. I think Speedily's a good player. I think Kai is a good player. I think Vigilante is a good player. I think Atlanta has dog shit team synergy. I don't think that Hydron, Surmajed, someone, I don't think Checkmate, I don't think are necessarily better players than the individual power on Atlanta, but I think that Florida is looking like a more cohesive team right now. I mean, half the Atlanta Reign games from this whole phase were just like, what are you guys doing? Like, what's happening? And I know that Kai has carry potential. Kai's phenomenal. I know that Speedily is going to be a monster in the league. Like, I believe all of these things. I don't know if Atlanta Reign's the team they're going to do it on.
Well, so hear me out here, because for these two specifically, we do have to kind of go looking at the entire season again. Atlanta has consistently had solid showings in both tournament cycles. That's now three metas. That they didn't look great until the end of this meta. So, like, similar story to LA, in the sense that, like, they can get it together. They have the tools to get it together. They started to pull it back at the end of this cycle and only lost out on the tournament because of their loss to LA. So, like, a team that reached curb stomp potential knocked them out of the tournament, and Florida got in on that. So, I think if we go historically, I think the odds are more in favor of Atlanta to have a showing in the next cycle. Especially if we go back to something faster and more mobile. I think Kai is the better hit scan over between Kai and Hydron. I would take Kai every single time. Speedily and Checkmate, it's a little bit closer because Speedily is a rookie and still does rookie things. But what
do you think about Kai versus Exy? Because Exy is also on Florida.
That's fair. Consistency still gives me Kai, because Kai always pops off. Exy, when Exy pops off, but he kind of chooses his moments there. So
sure.
I would still, if I was gambling, if you had to, if you gave me a random meta, like, this is the reason I'm looking at it is like this, okay? If we don't know what the meta is, and because we don't know what the meta is, I'm inclined to give it to Atlanta because they tend to pick it up faster. Florida didn't look great until the tournament. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when the whole stage, they looked kind of subpar and almost didn't make the tournament at all. They looked great in the tournament, and that was it. So, like, I am far more inclined to put Atlanta above them, because if I was gambling on it today, that's who I would pick.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll take that. I would agree with you there. I think that's a fair point. I like this list that we've built. I feel good about this. Do you feel good about this?
Yeah, this is I'm fine with this. Like I said, especially until we know what the new changes are and whether or not we're gonna see an actually different meta. I think this, if you had to gamble on this list, you could. And I think that's okay. That's okay enough for me.
So for the sake of the audio listeners, we have Dallas Fuel, San Francisco Shock, LA Gladiators, Tier Break, Toronto Defiant, London Spitfire, Tier Break, Houston Outlaws, Atlanta Reign, Florida Mayhem, Tier Break, Vancouver Titans, Washington Justice, Boston Uprising, New York Excelsior, Paris Eternal. And that is the official Spectator Diff Overwatch League 2022 September 12th power rankings. There you go.
Yeah. And I think that's we can wrap a bow on this.
I think we can. I think this is a great place to wrap a bow on it. Like I mentioned earlier, we will be off next week, so don't go looking for us on the 19th. We will be back on the 26th. However, there may still be stuff on the channel. Yeah. So subscribe, fucking pound that bell. Just pound the shit out of it, man. Ring that bell like a boy in a church bell choir. Ring it all night. And that'll do it for this episode of Spectator Diff. Again, subscribe to us on YouTube and do the thumbs and all that other stuff. Also, please subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. leave us a 5-star review. That'd be super nice of us. You can follow me on socials at MC_DJ_MC.
And me at lastcall_gaming.
And until next time, remember, we're better at watching Overwatch than you.
GG's, everybody.